This week, Xi Jinping is going to meet with the president of Russia, India, South Africa, and other world leaders in order to discuss how can they potentially put an end to the Western global dominance. And the Western world stands on the United States, and the United States economy stands on the US dollar. So the first step to put the end to the US global dominance is to get rid of the dollar, because the dollar is what allows the United States to have such a powerful economy, and with that powerful economy, the United States is funding the world's largest military that allows it to be at the top and dictate the rules of the game. Of course, the United States is still ahead of China, but if you take a look historically, United States is like 250 years old, while China is like 4,000 years old. So China is really good at playing the game very quietly and outlasting its competitors. So here in this video, I'm gonna show you how exactly China has been planning in order to get rid of the US dollar and replace it with the yuan. Now, if you take a look at the history, you will realize that what really made the United States dollar such a powerful economy and the currency is that it was built on the backbone of the World War II. Now, if you go back to the World War II, you will realize that most of the world was destroyed, and that war was mainly because all of those European countries started taking huge loans from the United States. So when the war ended, not only that those countries were entirely destroyed, now all of them, including France, Britain, Germany, they owed like a lot of money, hundreds of millions. And back then, that was a lot of money. In today's term, it's probably like hundreds of billions of dollars if you count inflation. The Soviet Union also owed the United States so much money. So all of them realized that the United States now is going to be the most powerful country out there that will actually dictate the rules. Now, in order for your economy to grow, the single most important thing that you need is to trade. The more countries you trade with, the more countries trade with your country, the more powerful your economy is going to be. And that's what exactly the United States wanted. But how are you going to trade with other countries when the entire global economy is basically entirely destroyed? What are you going to do? Now, most of those countries, you see, the most important tool in the global finance is to be able to move money around. From France to the United States, from the United States to Africa, to the Middle East and other countries. And in order to do that, you need a global financial system. Now, prior to World War II, that was basically dominated by the British Empire. Now, after World War II, United States took the lead. And the United States had large enough banks and large enough power in order to establish all of those banks across Europe and other parts of the world. Because if I want to actually, for example, send money from the United States to someone in Germany, how are we supposed to do that? I mean, some countries can't even regulate their currencies within the boundaries. How are we supposed to do that internationally? I mean, just go back, for instance, to Hungary, 1970s. They couldn't manage their own currency for people to trade, so it ended up with hyperinflation. Go back to Zimbabwe, 2006. And the list of countries that couldn't manage their currencies and was entirely destroyed is very long. And now, how are you supposed to trade when you have two different countries with two different currencies? And that's why we need a global financial system, which means that we have the intermediary bank that is large enough and has branches and representatives in both of these countries and have enough assets both in Germany and the United States, and can not just kind of send gold or send money from one country to another, but rather they have like a global financial messaging app where I'm actually, for example, depositing money in the US, and this bank has enough resources in that country and will simply give it away without actually sending the money. So it's basically a global messaging app. And the only companies or the financial institutions could do that were the US banks, such as JP Morgan, Chase, Citi, and other banks that existed back on those days. And guess which currency those banks actually started using? Of course, all of them use the dollar because all of them are US banks. Now, suddenly more countries start using the dollar, besides the fact that the dollar was actually pegged to the gold. So suddenly, the entire world starts using the dollar, and that gives a lot of leverage to the United States. More money flows into the United States. The United States can print more money and literally kind of send that money to across the globe, and everybody is just using the dollar. Now, because everybody is using the dollar, it made the US economy much stronger than any other economy out there. And because the US economy became much stronger than any other economy out there, guess what exactly has happened? more countries, more people, rich people from across the globe. They look at the world, they're like, where exactly are we supposed to invest our money? Should we invest them in those countries that are not huge economies, or the United States that is the most stable and the strongest economy out there? So now more people want to invest their money in the US. Now more people are, now because so much people, so much companies investing in the United States, more people are interested in the stability and the safety of the United States, which means that now the US government bonds suddenly became the most safest investments out there. And suddenly now everybody around the globe wants to invest and buy US government bonds, bringing more money to the United States. Do you see what exactly is happening here? It's becoming like a snowball effect, like a never-ending cycle where resources from all across the globe are coming to the United States, making the United States wealthier. And because now it's the most wealthiest country in the world, people across the globe, smart people, intellectuals, people with PhDs, scientists, everybody is like, what exactly am I supposed to use my talents? Well, in the United States, they will pay me more money, so I'm going to go to the United States. Suddenly, all the talent from across the globe goes to the United States, making the United States even richer, wealthier, and that never-ending cycle takes the United States to the top and keeps it at the top. Now, in order for China to kind of dominate or overtake the US dollar, it must create the exact same effect so that the exact same cycle happens in China. And that's exactly what China wants. China wants to create a system that will allow the flow of money not to go to the United States, for example, but rather that flow of money will come to China. So the more money will flow into the China, the faster the economy is going to grow, and the faster economy to grow, that will attract more people to China. Now, theoretically, any country can do something like that. It doesn't really matter, right? But the problem is that not every single country is large enough to actually compete with the United States. Because first of all, you need to be geographically big enough. For instance, Britain, it's a pretty large country to a certain extent, but it's nothing compared to a country like China, United States, or Russia, or India. On the other side, Britain has a population of around 50 million people. Now, that's nothing compared to United States' 320 million people. So in order to compete and have such an impact, you need to have a large enough population and a large enough size of your country, and you must have the resources in order to do that. And China is one of the few countries in the world, besides India, for example, and Russia, and even Russia possibly cannot do that because besides being the world's largest country, it has a very small population of around like 150 million people or something like that. And without large enough population, you cannot possibly pull out anything like that. So China is perfectly positioned to compete with the United States. Now, India can do something like that as well, but India is kind of on the way. It's still kind of in the beginning of that phase, and China is right there to do that right now. So the first thing that China is, of course, did is that they started growing their economy, and they became the second world's largest economy. Now, it's the second largest world economy, and yuan becomes easily one of the most used currencies in the world. At least it's used by 1.5 billion people who actually live in China. So it's instantly becomes one of the most popular currencies in the world. But that is not enough. You have to convince the rest of the world to start using your currency or the Chinese yuan. And how exactly would you do that? I mean, why would anybody use any other currency when you have the dollar? Because everybody's interested in having a very stable currency. Now, I know that it brings a lot of benefits to the United States, but you have to understand that the dollar is one of the greatest things out there. The fact that we have one single currency used by all countries across the globe makes international business so easy. It makes people to get rich across the world so easy. So everybody, you have to understand that everybody in China, Europe, Russia, India, Africa, Asia, everywhere, everybody, all rich people simply love the dollar because it allows them to do international trade, and that's how people actually get rich. So how do you kind of convince people to stop using the dollar and start using your currency? And that's why China launches something that you call Belt and Road Initiative. And that means that China suddenly starts building infrastructure projects all across the globe. Now you have built all those bridges and trains and ports all across your country. Now you'll just take that technology and you will start building that all across the world, the rest of the world. So you start building them in Central Asia, in Iran, Turkey, and even in Europe, some of them. But that's not all. You start building ships, ports. So goods will actually travel from China to Vietnam, to Jakarta in Indonesia, to India, and then probably through the Strait of Hormuz to Iran, and then through the Red Sea to Europe. So basically, all those countries suddenly China started building all of those infrastructure projects all across the globe. And now you have to ask yourself, if Chinese companies building infrastructure projects all across those countries, guess in what currency all those countries are paying China? Of course, they're paying China in Chinese yuan. Now, most of those countries cannot afford those infrastructure projects. And even if they can afford them, why would you actually pay them straight away when you can actually take a loan? And China made a system where all of those countries can borrow money from Chinese banks to pay Chinese companies to build those bridges, roads, ports, and all the trains all across the globe. And guess in what currency do Chinese banks loan their money? Of course, they loan in the Chinese yuan. So suddenly, besides China, all those countries where Chinese infrastructure projects are happening are using the Chinese yuan much more often. And because they're using the Chinese yuan much more often, they start trading with China exclusively in Chinese yuan and start using the dollar significantly much less often. Of course, maybe the European countries are not doing that, but anything else, any other country beside the European currency are doing that significantly. And now you have to understand that the most popular system to send money across the globe is the SWIFT system. And it's of course not developed by the United States, but it's mainly controlled by the United States. So the SWIFT is a global financial messaging app, and it's heavily influenced by the United States because in order to send money from one bank to another, for example, from Germany to the United Kingdom, then exactly happens is that you always have like the intermediary bank, and that intermediary bank is the US bank, because the US bank is significantly bigger than all of those banks in most of the part of Europe and even the rest of the world. So that is like a system that is used mostly, like most of the transactions done within the SWIFT system, it's actually done by the US dollar. Of course, China also has access to the SWIFT system, but China knows that it's basically dominated by the dollar and it's mostly controlled by the United States. So China suddenly creates an alternative system that is called CIPS, and it launched that system in 2015 so that other countries from all across the globe, suddenly they will have an opportunity in order to pay China in Chinese yuan. That includes African countries, that includes Russia, and even some parts of Europe, and even some parts of not even some parts, probably the entire South America pays China in Chinese yuan. And that is the system that is alternative to SWIFT. Now that system was actually launched in 2015, which is literally like less than 10 years ago. And in the beginning of its phase, it was established between 50 countries and 200 financial institutions. Now this is absolutely nothing compared to SWIFT, because there are around 11,000 banks or financial institutions use the SWIFT system, and SWIFT system is literally used in every single country around the globe except the countries that are sanctioned by the United States, such as Russia, Iran, North Korea, and probably some other countries out there. I can't literally name them right now. But this system that is built by China has been growing so fast that by 2024, it's already used in 184 countries by almost 5,000 banks. That is a significant growth over such a short period of time. Now, just for the context, that SWIFT actually has around 11,000 banks. So you can say in theory that it's almost already like 40% of the SWIFT. And you have to understand another thing, that SWIFT was built back in after World War II, and the world was a completely different place. We did not have things such as the internet, we did not have things such as blockchain. And today, with the rise of the internet, building that kind of a technology is much easier. It's much like you have the internet, you have the blockchain. So central banks from across the globe can literally build a system upon the blockchain where sending money and transferring money is going to be significantly easier between all those countries, right? And that's why that growth is happening much faster than the growth actually happened with SWIFT back in those days. And that's the advantage that China is taking with the CIPS. And CIPS is growing so fast that probably within the next 10 years, it is going to be as big as SWIFT, because it's already like half the size of the SWIFT already within 9 years. And from 2015, and I mean, China's economy right now is much larger than it was in 2015. Back then, it was like $12 trillion, $11 trillion, or probably even $10 trillion. I think you can pull out the data to actually find it out. And right now, it's like $18 to $19 trillion. And the biggest problem or the challenge that the US faces is that it cannot possibly stop China. Like the United States right now, with the first Trump presidency in 2016, realized that we gotta stop China before they actually overtake us. That was the main premise of the presidency of Trump. He started putting tariffs, started doing everything to stop China. But it was already too late, because China and the United States are so interconnected with each other that it's impossible now to sanction China if you want. Now, first of all, as far as I know, China is the third largest trading partner for the United States. China imports around $700 billion worth of goods to the United States. So if the United States, for example, sanctions China tomorrow, there will be a shortage of $700 billion worth of goods to the United States. Suddenly, there's going to be a very serious, catastrophic financial crisis in the United States because of that. Another thing you have to understand is that there are so many companies between United States and China that they work with each other and they operate in each other's countries, that they have built a global, complicated supply chain. And it's very, it is one of the reasons why goods are so much cheaper than they have ever been in the history. Why? Because we have such an efficient, complicated supply chain where, for example, companies such as Apple can build their products in China and kind of bring all those materials from all across the globe, ship them somewhere, and then get them to the rest of the world. The same thing applies to companies like Nike, Starbucks. We have so many American companies in China. For example, China accounts one of the largest consumers of Apple products. China is one of the largest sources of revenue for Starbucks, and a list of other US companies. Now, the same thing could be said about Chinese companies that are in the United States. There are a lot of businesses, a lot of companies. For instance, take Alibaba, one of the largest Chinese companies. Where do you think its stocks are listed? They're listed in the New York Stock Exchange. So these two economies are so interconnected that it's not possible to sanction China just like, for example, the United States did with a country like Russia. Russia didn't have any kind, they had some connections with the United States, but since like 2014, when the first round of sanctions started, that interconnection started going down slowly, or I would say even significantly. Another thing is that China holds over $800 billion worth of US government bonds. And when China holds so much government bonds, the US government has to pay a lot of interest to the Chinese government for holding all those bonds. Guess what exactly does that mean? Now, if you sanction China, and you kick it out from the SWIFT system like you did, for example, with Russia, how are you supposed to pay them their interest? And if you don't pay China, for example, because of your government bonds, you're going to default on your loan, which means that you will destroy your credit score, and that's not something the US is actually interested in. And if you take a look at the numbers, if the Chinese economy grows by 5% annually, and 5% is very conservative for an economy like China that has been growing by 8, 9, or 10% in some cases. Let's say that it is going to grow by 5% starting from this year. This year it's trying to hit 5% point. Some people say it might not. Others say that yes, it is going to hit 5%. Others say it's going to be 4.8%. But if it grows by 5% over the next 5 to 10 years, it is going to overtake the United States as the largest economy before 2035. And now ask yourself a very simple question. If China is going to become the world's largest economy and the US is going to be the second largest economy, naturally more countries will be using the Chinese yuan instead of the dollar. Now, I'm not saying that it is going to be the end of the dollar or people will get rid of the dollar, people will stop using the dollar as the global currency reserve. That is not what's going to happen. The US dollar will continue being probably the largest or the most used global currency reserve. But it's one thing to be a currency reserve, and it's an entirely different thing to be the currency that is used in global trade. And when you use that currency in a global trade, and if you trade with China, you will simply be forced to use the currency that you are with the country that you're actually trading. And right now, I think China is the largest trading partner to most of the world, unlike the United States. Of course, the countries with whom the US is the largest trading partner are significantly wealthier than those countries, because most of those countries that are trading mostly with China, and China is their largest trading partner, are second or maybe third world countries. But when China becomes the largest economy in the world, the Chinese yuan will be used more and more, and China will enjoy the exact same effect that the United States did back after World War II. Remember? Because your currency used the most, more money flows into your country. More money flows into your country, your economy grows more. It attracts more talent, it attracts more money, it attracts more investments, it attracts more companies, and that means that your economy grows even faster. And now suddenly everybody wants to buy your government bonds because people view your government bonds as the safest and the stable source of investments for other countries. Now more money will flow into your country and you grow even wealthier. And since the GDP per capita of China is around like $14,000 or $15,000 compared to US's $80,000, there is a lot of room to grow for China. So what is exactly going to happen in the foreseeable future? Now, I don't think anything major is going to happen. I hope that this is not going to end up like a hot war like it happened back in 1940s with Europe, for example. But there's going to be a very serious competition between these two countries on the resources. And of course, what that basically means for the average American is that the United States will no longer be able to enjoy all the benefits that it enjoyed since 1945. People will have to work harder, people will have to pay more taxes, and competition will be fierce. Of course, the average person is going to suffer the most because rich people simply invest in the stock market, they own businesses, they own stocks, they own real estates, and their their wealth will simply keep rising as the global economy keeps actually growing, even if that means that there's going to be a very fierce competition between a country like the United States and China. Now, the best way that I know that you can protect yourself, protect your wealth, and grow your wealth is to put your money to work and start investing. Now, achieving mastery at any skill takes years, if not decades. And that's why most people never actually start investing. And even if they do, they never learn how to do it effectively. Now, if you want to actually learn how to start investing and get real results in a month or two and learn how to make your first $100,000 in the stock market, then check out the first link in the description. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.